It's a well-known fact, Phil. Rain changes games.
Hmm. Rain changes games, Raina changes contracts, but yeah, a lot of rain. Tropical storm Alberto. I asked Brad if he thought he was a better offense or defense player, which is kind of a weird question for me to ask. I just asked Alberto at first. He didn't know what I was talking about, so I had to clarify that it was tropical storm Alberto. So that's the kind of weather nerdery that I bring on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, to the press conferences and the media availability with players afterwards. But interesting, he thought it made the field faster. He liked
Yeah.
it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think the as the weather was coming in on the forecast, that made me immediately go, LAFC doesn't do well with weather. And by weather, I mean
Hmm.
anything falling from the sky, snow, rain, goals. For some reason, they just do not handle weather terribly well. And I think the predictions going in, yours included, and mine agreeing with yours, was that things were not going to go great last night. And I think all that rain ended up favoring the home team, made them feel like, something was coming, something was happening.
Hmm. Yeah. And for a while, it looked like it was going to be a 1-0 win. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, well, there's probably an equalizer coming. I'm writing this story as if it is a 1-0 win. I'm going to go ahead and go with this. I have to be positive assumptive when I do these sorts of things in writing recaps. That's just kind of the occupational hazard being a journalist in the sports world, right? So you see kind of a possible sort of outcome happening, just kind of a little trade secret. I've done things before where I haven't been sure, and I've written kind of two different versions of the story side by side. One, which in this case would have been predicting an LAFC equalizer, in the other case, predicting that they would hang on. That, of course, didn't happen. Certainly, our emergency that we're going to talk about a little bit has to do with some late decisions that were made, but possibly even kind of more of an interesting development is something that Matthew McConaughey tweeted out.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we should probably go ahead and dig in, but I did not
Now that we've
have.
completely
Yeah,
we
uh,
we had an outline, we've
yeah.
kind of blown.
That's the emergency. Is we didn't have an outline, then we had an outline, then we blew the outline completely. But you know what? I don't think anybody had the betting line right on was
Mm-mm,
Giassi
what?
Zardes backward heel kick, almost taking out someone's eye.
Yeah, yeah, that was a development. That was something that created even more stoppage time, buying more time for me to do the rewrite. So, in a weird way, shout out to Eddie Segura's eye, which may or may not still be there, and shout out to Zardes for being able to high kick still and be limber at his advanced age. So yeah, but we got to get to this Matthew McConaughey thing. So he tweeted after the match, or actually, I guess it was probably still when the match was going on, but he had kind of decided in his mind that it was over, and it was indeed a 1-0 win. He said, "Beautiful football tonight, Austin FC. Show that every night, and the future is bright. 100% from top to bottom and all around. Bottle it." Bottle it,
He-
unfortunately, is a
yeah,
term that refers to fail at something because you were frightened. And the example often given dictionaries is that he was going to take the penalty but bottled it.
yeah. I don't know that a minority stake owner should be commanding the team to bottle things. That
Mhm.
doesn't seem like a good frame of mind to put them in.
Unless it is Pantalones tequila for the
Yeah,
media.
yeah.
And in that case, I'm all for bottling that.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the podcast where we deal with all the Austin FC emergencies that come up, whether or not it is a 3-game and 8-day sort of week, or whether it is a week where there is absolutely nothing happening. We have the former. We're in the midst of 3 games in 8 days. We are tired people. We are wiped out, but we are still bringing you this podcast, which is recording Thursday, should be dropping Friday at some point. That is what we're doing. We are here to serve. There are emergencies that are emerging, and we have to talk about them. With me is Moisés Chiullán. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We're tired. I'm heavily medicated. So,
Mm.
yeah, I could be all over the place. I don't know how difficult of an editing job I'm going to create just by my presence alone, but yeah, hopefully entertainment value ends up papering over some of that. Yeah, I mean we have a spinning back heel kick to talk about. We have emergencies that have been ongoing emergencies. Begs the question: is an emergency if it is a weeks long, in some cases months long thing, or is everything an emergency? And is that really the lesson of this show and the deeper hidden meaning that we're trying to get along across to everybody? I don't know. I don't know. I'm already going off the rails, Phil, and Copa America hasn't started yet. It won't start until as we record this tonight. But we got 3 games in 8 days for Austin FC, the continuing group stage of the Euros, and now Copa America on top of all that. And somehow these players who cross the different competitions are expected to stay healthy, perform at their absolute best, and not disappoint anyone. The Euros so far have been a panoply of own goals. Who knows what Copa America is going to end up looking like?
Right, exactly. And of course, tonight that starts. By the time that you get this in your various vehicles, be it Apple, Spotify, YouTube, what have you, you'll know if my Canada team managed to look good against Argentina or not. The money is probably on or not. But then again, we also thought that LAFC was going to thump Austin last night, and that did not happen. So I want to get into some of that. But first, I did want to touch on one thing before we get into the emergencies and the games and things like this, because this came up as a subject, and we're talking about tournaments. We're talking too much soccer to watch. This was a tweet that came out last Friday from Lizzie, who used to be over at 90 Minutes, and now she's over at ESPN. So, recent conversation with Brad Purcell, MLS Senior VP of Game Schedule Management, somebody who various players might be cursing about this time of the year, discussed the 2026 schedule in relation to the World Cup. He explained MLS will take a summer break given the magnitude and length of the tournament, though the duration of the pause is TBD, meaning we don't know if it's going to be paused for the whole tournament or just for parts of it. And to add, there will be a Leagues Cup tournament in 2026. The schedule is currently being worked on, I believe that was supposed to say, but Leagues Cup won't be cut.
Now, Phil, your immediate reflexive reaction to this, one of my favorites, was so how are you going to do that? Where are you putting all these
Yeah,
games?
I believe I tweeted
Yeah.
back LMAO what?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
is,
I
you know,
believe I believe
articulate, the
that was
articulation that people have come to
yeah.
expect of me.
Yeah, that was the exact quote, but I mean within that acronym spoke volumes. We've talked about the maybe too long MLS regular season with the expanded playoff
Mhm.
schedule. Could
Mhm.
they trim back part of the regular season? Could they start the season early? But when is it that they're planning on doing Leagues Cup? Are they going to do Leagues Cup after the season's over? Like,
No,
where
like,
are they
are
going
they
to put
still
it?
gonna, are they gonna wedge it in between the end of World Cup? Like, you've had this thrilling World Cup, somebody has been crowned a champion, and now we're going to do the little tournament that could. And again, I love Leagues Cup for its chaos. I love seeing US teams play against Liga MX teams. I don't necessarily like that Leagues Cup is hijacking Open Cup. Clearly, Don Garber would want to see Open Cup die a noble death, or an ignoble death, or at least not involve MLS teams at all going forward. It's kind of been strange energy this year, obviously. I mean, Leagues Cup, I think the games in and of themselves are kind of more fun, higher quality, more chaos than Open Cup games. But given kind of the tradition and given what it means, and given that you are supposed to have a domestic cup involving multiple leagues if you are D1 sanctioned and you're trying to send a team to international tournaments and all that, probably something you would want to keep on just to be on the right side of FIFA, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say, but I just said it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the idea of 2026, you're going to have a World Cup. Theoretically, Open Cup is still going to be around. Theoretically, you're going to do this expanded playoffs with 9 teams per conference in a best of 3 series. I don't see how that's possible unless we're just kind of playing January through December. Maybe that's a solution. Maybe more orange balls, more snow games. Maybe we're doing that. I don't know. Moises, though, you got to put forth the question, John Gallagher and Ethan Finley, and you got some pretty interesting reactions from them. So let's hear what they had to say and then just kind of your thoughts about it.
Yeah, very organically, I wanted to bring up, knowing that Ethan is the team's MLSPA Players Union rep, I wanted to bring up the congestion of fixtures on top of international play windows. And it came up naturally before it even got around to me in the press conference on Tuesday. And he noted that, yeah, it's challenging and it's something that does need to be looked at. And it's something that is not easy on the players, certainly. Even if they're only missing 2 players, looking at how short MLS rosters are, and I don't think it's crazy to have that opinion, honestly, because you look at so many of these clubs, and it is more the rule than the exception that MLS rosters are short of people anytime a couple of guys have to
Mhm.
go do international duty. And that was before Leagues Cup, even that was a problem, or the current incarnation of Leagues Cup, because as I'm fond
Mhm.
of pedantically noting, Leagues Cup did exist previously, but not in the fully fleshed out form that it is now. So yeah, Ethan
No,
talked about it.
it was just 8 teams
Yeah,
doing
it was
kind
it
of
was
a
the Club World Cup, but for Concacaf teams, basically.
yeah, and then there was a period where it was just kind of like exhibitions, but they did manage to create a 22-pound trophy, which has persisted,
Yeah,
which looks like a kind of oversized vase
yeah,
or
and it's
some sort of bath bowl,
yeah,
some
it
bird
is not
bath or
as
something like
easily
that,
hoistable as other soccer trophies. Yeah,
which is part of the appeal.
it's weird, it's strange. I like weird and strange, and that's
Mhm.
one of the things that comes out of that play. There are 2 sides of Leagues Cup, I guess, to derail momentarily. Like, there are 2 sides of it for me, where on the one hand, I love having those matchups happening as somebody who enjoys watching football. I don't love that the commissioner of Major League Soccer, the biggest booster and driver of the whole thing, has taken it as one of the fronts in his war against Open Cup and USL and the various other things that he would like to absolutely demolish and make go away in the name of Major League Soccer supremacy. I think that there's a fine line between watching out for the league that you are commissioner of and doing damage to the overall environment that can't be rolled back when it comes to generating interest in soccer in the United States.
And in the process, other leagues.
Exactly. It's something that it messes up the development pyramid, not just in the United States, but in other leagues that interact with US players, with lower division teams, all that kind of stuff. It MLS cannot own the entire pyramid. In England, as insane as people think that Garber is for pushing to destroy Open Cup, that it would be tantamount to England getting rid of the FA Cup. Similarly, I can't see them being able to process and understand why this obsession with, for example, the Premier League wanting to own the entire English soccer pyramid, which is
Mhm.
kind of the way that Garber's moves have been interpreted. There have been rumors going around that in MLS2, a second division, but a closed second division with no promotion relegation, um, is the sort of thing that may be in the offing and is part of the reason that they have been pushing next pro teams to rebrand and move into different markets, in some cases directly competing with existing USL franchises like Oakland Roots in the case of the Town. Other examples have come into play But we'll see how much success MLS actually has with that. So
Yeah. So
back to the schedule congestion part of it. The other damage that there is in this trying to speed up the 100-year war with a bunch of plant fertilizer. You are blasting through these players' ability to just stand on their own 2 feet without expanding the rosters before we even hit 2026. Just with Leagues Cup being in play, having what's happening with the Euros and Copa America right now, Garber is not going to be able to eventually have the power to force the Euros into not happening when they're going to happen, or Copa America not happening when it's going to happen. They're incredibly vacant stands at Inter Miami games all of a sudden because Messi isn't playing, and people are like, fine, I'll be back when Messi shows up. There is a sustainable path that involves actually trying to cultivate the diehard fans that, for example, we see in the Austin market, who ensure that even if it's a little bit lightly attended sometimes for midweek matches, you still have the sellouts, you still have the waiting list for season tickets and that kind of thing, where people are really dedicated to these clubs. And trying to artificially thumb the scale by going, okay, well, we're going to control the highest visibility stuff and go for broke, and who cares if it breaks these players in half. That's just not going to work. So Ethan said the very diplomatic kind of thing that he did about, we need to look at this, we need to figure this out because this is going to be really rough. And that does something to player stamina in and of itself. You're having to be vigilant and active on your feet in a different way than if it isn't monsoon pouring on you. So after
Mhm.
the game last night, John Gallagher, talking to local TV guys, was asked about that. And he just flat out said it's a joke. It's a joke to have two international cup competitions happening and league play is still going. That isn't to say that MLS will move to the European calendar or something like that, but it could end up being that 2026 ends up being an opportunity for something of a reset point if they're staggering things around regardless. It boggles my mind to think, because people say, oh, MLS is moving to more of a European schedule. Do you mean the actual calendar schedule, or do you mean the complexity of it? Or do you mean both? Um,
Right.
that's very much an open question. So then when
Yeah.
we talked to Ethan right toward the end of the night last night, assuming that he hadn't been aware of this rumor that Leagues Cup is happening, rumor from a reliable source, I should say, his reaction was pretty flatly, well, that's a lot of soccer.
It
That's
is.
that is a lot of
Indeed.
soccer.
Right.
And he came down on the side of, look, it's not to say that like the players, it's not that we don't want Leagues Cup to happen. It's that we've got to be realistic about what human beings are actually capable of doing. And
Mm.
I hope that the MLSPA starts making moves now rather
Right.
than after the fact, after it's announced, after it's just asserted as fact and this is going to happen. You're going to play this whether you like it or not and go kick rocks. My hope is that they stick up for themselves.
Right. And we're talking about expanding the roster, but I
Yeah.
think we need to kind of clarify what that might be, right? So on one hand, yeah, you can just say, oh, there's a few extra spots, but we're not going to do anything to allow teams to realistically fill those, right? But if you do say, okay, we can have more international spots allotted to teams, we can have looser kind of restrictions on the short-term agreements, right? So where it's not just 4 call-ups and 2 appearances, but maybe it's like, say, 6-3 or 6-4, something that will allow for a little bit more fluidity, a little bit more of an opportunity. I mean, you don't want to stash first team players on a second team roster. And that, I think, was what that's trying to avoid. But if you can't realistically allow these people to play in a number of games and you're not able to field a full 20, as Austin struggled to do at points of this season, then I think it's a real indication that, yeah, that maybe the roster rules are a little too restrictive, especially if you are trying to manage the multiple competitions that you are. Because again, I mean, even though Austin's not playing a summer tournament until Leagues Cup. They're effectively playing a summer tournament now because they have two starters that are in Copa America and they have to adjust for that. And we'll talk a little bit later about kind of what you should root for in Copa America if you want to see, Danny Pereira and Julio Cascante back in Q2 Stadium, not with their national teams, but with Austin FC, because there is a pathway to that. But in the short term, if you are looking towards 2026 and the logjam of games that are going to happen, I agree. There is something that needs to happen now. And there does need to be, again, MLS rules are pretty convoluted. There are reasons that they're convoluted. I understand kind of the rationale for a lot of them. At this juncture, when you're talking about managing everything that you're going to manage, you either have to be realistic about the playoffs and winnow those down, or do something. There's some radical things you could do, right? So once they get to 30 teams, you can maybe pare down the schedule. I don't know that MLS would want to drop from 34 game schedule to something like a 30. I mean, you're going to lose 2 home games with a scenario like that. But if you are quote unquote making them up with Leagues Cup, then maybe that's okay, right? Again, I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things happening this summer, right? So obviously you've deprived people of the Open Cup experience, and obviously the experience for Austin in 2024 was one Verdos game that did not work out all that well. And there were, kind of questions about, okay, well, are they going to ever get to play in Q2? That got decided pretty quickly. But then again, this kind of question of Leagues Cup, right? And how many people are going to avoid it? Or again, since it's Monterrey and Pumas that are coming here, how many of the fans are actually going to be wearing those colors versus the familiar green and black, or the familiar whatever color we have determined that the Dillo kits are?
Pistachio ice cream and Mexican
Okay.
vanilla. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an ice cream kit. It's got ice cream vibes, if you ask me.
Mhm.
Can you tell I'm on a lot of medication?
I can. Can you tell I'm on far too little sleep?
Yeah,
You probably
look,
also can.
yeah, that's look, we're running ourselves ragged. The players are running themselves ragged, adding a fifth to the back to try to neutralize Kai Kamara and his magical head. Um, you know, they're struggling, we're struggling, we're all muddling through somehow.
That's a fine transition. Okay, that is our emergency. So we've had the situation. This has come up before, but a few different times this season. Josh Wolff has a predilection for late in the game wanting to put a center back or otherwise kind of jigger the back line so there is an extra player in the back that is helping with defense. And again, typically kind of the idea is teams that are chasing a goal late are pushing players forward. They're making offensive subs, and Wolff's counter to that, which on one hand might be a sound strategy, is to just put extra defenders back there. But that also does a couple of different things, right? So that also makes it to where, like last night, if LAFC all of a sudden gets an equalizer, as they did, then you are kind of less equipped to get a game winner, and you've kind of seeded that win for a draw with that move. So yeah, and again, just the kind of idea that doesn't always work. That's the gamble, that just because you are putting more defensive numbers in there to counter offensive numbers, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are actually going to counter those. But that does seem to be the prevailing wind with Wolff. I mean, we saw in the game against St. Louis, right, that Ethan Finley mysteriously became a right back, and that didn't work. Celio Pompu from St. Louis, who is now out for the season with pretty bad injury, he managed to get the equalizer in that game, and 3 points became 1. Same kind of thing happened last night with Kai Kamara, but there's been other games that I noted in my article this morning, kind of thinking about playing Dallas and playing, there's one other that's in here, SKC, right, preserving that kind of magical 3-2 win that happened. Again, that is something that was able to take place because a defender came in. I've been, at the risk of overusing the joke, I'll refer to Anchorman and Matt Hedges being the Sex Panther of late game subs, right? 60% of the time it works every time. So Moises, what is your viewpoint on going 5 in the back late?
I don't think that it is a fundamentally unsound strategy, but I think if you are looking at these games where this has happened, people rightfully note the trend of when they do this, it doesn't work. And I don't think that it is fundamentally a problem that they are beefing up the back line. It's that It seems that Wolf's strategy, and because they're so black box about all this stuff, we don't really know. We can just go based on what we see and what we can assume. When they go to 5 in the back, the strategy shifts to taking a primarily defensive posture and not going real hard for scoring more goals. Um, when CJ Fodry came in during stoppage time, suddenly the verticality exploded in a way that
Mhm.
we hadn't really seen during the whole second half. And so when Matt Hedges came in, I pretty firmly believe that if they had subbed CJ in for Seba then, that we might have
Mhm.
seen a second Austin goal. If CJ Fodry had been given more time, as I've referred to in various conversations about this, given more of a sample size of actual minutes to play when his teammates are not completely wrecked at the very bitter end of a long monsoon game, I'm thoroughly convinced that you have a young player as talented as CJ Fodry is, and you let him perform, then guess what? He performs. I think that was tactically the biggest mistake, was not doing a double
Right.
sub right then and focusing entirely on the defensive posture. That you know, hindsight is incredibly 2020.
Mhm.
Hindsight is sometimes a little off of 2020. You know, there's
That's what happens when you come in late to camp.
you know, that's the problem. Let's be honest. Yeah, I feel like there needs to be more focus on the attack and not just going, okay, we're not even going to try for it. We're just going to stick to the horseshoe and we'll let them possess the ball like they have been, and we'll just let them keep chipping away at this wall, and certainly it won't crack, and then it keeps cracking every time. Wonder why that
Right.
happens.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I thought what Wolf said is interesting. I mean, yeah, your point on Fodry, I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly vertical player can definitely do a lot of damage offensively. Kind of the flip side to that is that he also, again, is young, is not terribly experienced in MLS. You're dealing with a pretty experienced, pretty good team in LAFC, and there is kind of the dice roll that you take there that okay, maybe there's some kind of turnover, there's some kind of misplay that he makes that leads to a goal on the other end. That there's kind of a chain reaction that happens from that. But the kind of interesting thing about Wolff and kind of his justification for it last night was not from kind of a position of strength. It was kind of like, yeah, I know that we can close this out. Um, Matt Hedges is an experienced defender in this league. He knows how to shut those teams down. I'm gonna, kind of rely on him like a closer, which is kind of yeah. Long Cow has he's one of the fans that's in Los Verde a lot with a lot of good math. He's talking about this idea of kind of akin to closers coming in at the end of baseball games. So there's going to be some nerdery, maybe afoot on that. We're trying to come up with the terminology. Obviously, a save is confusing. You can't translate that from baseball to soccer because it means something entirely different in soccer, but maybe it's something like a hold, right? Where you're trying to keep a 1 goal lead late in a game. And so you're making a defensive sub that is trying to preserve that. But Wolff didn't come at it from that kind of optimistic viewpoint. He said, our guys, you can see the fatigue setting in and they start pinning you back just because they have qualities that can hurt you. We're being pinned back the entire second half. We're pinned in, and they got guys all over the place along our back line. Hedges is 6'4". He and Brendan are 3 natural center backs. The crosses are coming at a rapid rate regardless. The structure in the end of the games is challenging. It gets a little bit chaotic. You can see that they're throwing balls from everywhere. So essentially he's saying, we're getting tired. Matt, you're tall. Get in there. Try to save this game. It just doesn't seem like it comes from this position of strength. It seems like the mindset is we're getting cooked out here and we need an extra defender to try to staunch the bleeding.
Yeah, that sort of forfeiture of controlling the game is just that's what gets at me.
Hmm.
Where it is just acknowledging that, okay, we are not capable of changing the momentum of this game, and like the reason I keep harping on bring in CJ Fodry sooner and watch that game change,
Mhm.
when you're bringing in not just fresh legs but fresh young legs that have not
Mhm.
gone through injury after injury in a very long career,
Right.
you have the opportunity to change the momentum of things in an appreciable way. I think that the back half of that game looks different if Driussi comes off 15 minutes into the second half. We've seen Fodry play about a half hour a couple of times now as a sub. And did he spectacularly change things magically and perfectly? No, not necessarily. But there are so many variables that go into it that it's difficult to calculate easily as well. Look at this stat. Look at this stat. Look at this stat. There's a lot of conditional stuff that goes into how the chemistry would have worked differently last night. What Austin
Mhm.
was missing was shots, 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 shots. 3 shots to 13 or 14, depending on who you're looking at. And Fodry coming in hungry is the thing that I like the most about him. Like, has he, absolutely changed the face of the team or something miraculous? No, no, no. That's not why I'm high on him. I'm high on him because there's this sort of struggle ball mindset that I see the guys get into where it's like, all right, we're gonna hunker down again. Hopefully they don't score 3 on us and we knock in an own goal or something like that. It just you can see it set in on them that they are not fans of it, and that it feels like a form of forfeiture, that these guys want to be hungry for the attack, but you've got Rubio and Zardes as our strikers, and they've got a certain amount of gas in the tank, but they don't have the kind of gas in the tank that guys like Obrian, guys like Fodry do. And if you're going to have these older veteran twilight of their career players, you've got to balance that with guys that, have the high end nitrous that are going to win the race in the end. That's where I don't know if it's to take it out of Wolff's mouth, is CJ earning it yet? Has he proven his stripes yet or whatever, that he deserves
Mhm.
it or something like that? Okay. That's you've got to achieve this merit badge and this merit badge and this community service, and then you get to be an Eagle Scout. Let the kid go. Let the kid move.
Right.
Let him do what he does well.
Yeah, and the thing is that Fodry comes in for Driussi, and then like that's after it's considerably after Hedges comes in for Finley. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
like maybe you do make a double sub at that point. Yeah, maybe you do, decide, okay, we're going to shore up the defense, but we're also going to, again, but the trick is, and kind of got into this with Wolff a little bit, that either, right now you're either, depending on where you play Owen Wolff, you're either seeding central mid depth or you're seeding winger depth. You're not really able to at this point until Bukhari comes in. And again, this is kind of the Rigoni effect. Again, you have to take out a key winger taking a lot of minutes, if nothing else, in May. And it's late June. And so obviously that depth is affected. And then of course you have a center mid that's off on international duty as well. So yeah, part of it is just the challenge of you don't really have qualified players to
Yeah.
choose from. But then also, you kind of have things like in this match, it makes sense for Hedges to try to counter Kamara like Wolff was talking about. But, in the St. Louis game, for example, it doesn't really make sense to have a fatigued Ethan Finley play right back when he's not
Yeah.
really a right back at all. He prides himself on his defense, but it just gets into these weird kind of horrible matchup things at the end. Wolff talked about it being a puzzle, and then he said, the puzzle is thin, which I didn't quite know where he was going with that. But I think he's maybe kind of meaning that your puzzle is because you have a thin roster, and you have to fit that together, and it becomes a lot trickier. I don't know. Maybe there's a better metaphor. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe the roster is Jenga right now, rather than a
Yeah.
puzzle. Right.
I mean, we should probably segue into the thing we're going to say about roster depth and players and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But this really was forecast to be like, everybody was assuming this is going to be a 4-0 drubbing. It was
Oh yeah, I
just
did.
not going
Yeah.
to go well. If various people said, if you told me yesterday afternoon that Austin was going to get out of this in a 1-1 draw, I'd be shouting to the heavens. What a
Yep.
lucky day. Wow, what a relief. But in the watching of it, that's where a draw like this feels like a loss, where it is one of those at the death sudden losses like the Frisco away game that
St. Louis
looked
this year.
yeah, yeah, St. Louis this year, but it was the Frisco away game last season that
Hmm.
looked like it was going to happen, and
Yep.
then suddenly it didn't. That is a recurring theme. I mean, that's where the Wolf out movement. That's where they get a lot of their fuel. I
Hmm.
think reasonably and understandably. So what? So the team needs players.
Yep.
The,
One more thing on Kamara before we get to that. It's wild to me that Kai Kamara and Josh Wolff were teammates.
yeah,
It really is.
it
Like,
feels
and
weird
yeah,
right
Davey
now.
Arnaud was on that team too.
Yeah, like they're dudes playing in the Euros right now, young guys that could be playing in the 2044 Euros. And it's weird thinking of the generational span of some of these players who, are starting their careers, playing in international competitions against the legends of the day that are, finishing their careers that will be themselves the legends of their day 20 years on. But yeah, it's interesting seeing that dynamic of whiz players uh that are still kicking around.
For sure. Yeah, so let's talk about needing players. So this is another interesting quote. And again, I understand that Josh Wolff is analytical. I understand that this is kind of how he likes to kind of approach the game, but I don't know how you feel necessarily if you're an Austin player and you're hearing your coach say this after you've busted butt for 90 minutes in the rain. I mean, it's true, and we kind of know this on like a roster quality standpoint, but just kind of hear this and let this sit. I think we need more firepower. I don't think there's any denying when you look at what the team has and what we have, there's a significant difference, and we understand that. We know that a lot of appreciation to our ownership, Anthony and all those guys for going out and now adding some pieces. We know we have to improve on that end of the field, both from a talent standpoint and a depth standpoint, and that's a big part of what's going on. So how do you feel as a player when you hear that? Is it like, yeah, that's right. I need
I mean,
better players alongside me, who's clearly one of the better players on this team, or kind of a is it kind of a slap in the face?
at this point, as many times as Josh has blamed the players for stuff that seems more to do with his chosen tactics, I, yeah, I don't know. I cannot imagine being a player and not being annoyed at that in some respect. And I think, for their own mental health, they probably don't go pulling up the post-match press conference to watch. So
Mhm.
unless we ask them about it, maybe they're blissfully unaware.
Mhm.
But it can't feel good. Can't feel good.
But at the same time, you look at striker, you look at, one goal per
Mhm.
570 minutes now from Rubio and Zardes, and really that's from Rubio because Zardes doesn't have a goal this year. I mean, that's obviously concerning, right? So I mean, if you're supposed to score goals and you're halfway through the season and you've only scored 3 goals or you haven't scored a goal at all, you probably understand if Roto is moving for a top tier striker in the summer, or at least, a competent striker in the summer. Because again, we've talked about this before. We like Rubio, we like Zardes, we like what they bring. But if you are, kind of to Wolff's point, trying to win an MLS Cup, then you're going to need more production out of that position than what they're offering.
I don't know how they can quickly turn this around. Even if the plan is this window and the next window, this is the window when the biggest moves get made. And
Mhm.
if you don't have like things are looking better on the wings than they did, but having something of a gaping hole in the middle when it comes to a younger playmaking does not get gassed 30 minutes in striker, just not having that is the biggest detriment to the whole system that they've got right now. They've got solid
Mhm.
defenders. That has been figured out. The question is, what happens to Gite's loan on June 30th?
Yep.
You know, what is the math like in terms of being able to buy down Ring to add a third full DP?
Mm-hmm.
I, unanswered questions. Does
Mm-hmm.
magically Musa Gite come back to the team all of a sudden? I don't know. Like crazier things have happened.
I know.
Josh mentioned missing him. Boy,
Yeah.
I miss him. Yeah, it's going to need to be a pretty active summer to make sure that Austin can stay above the playoff line at all, let alone in a favorable seating location. If the bar is make it to the playoffs, they're going to need more than just Dessler and Bukhari, and striker is where they need it the most.
Mm-hmm. Right. But again, yeah, to your point, I mean, there are strikers that are moving in and out of this league. I mean, it can be done. It's just a matter of, and again, I don't know that Miguel Borja is necessarily the answer either. Right. So, I kind of find it interesting that, um, that kind of he came up and for a while he was sort of the hope, right? I mean, there's definitely players that are out there. I mean, they could move, but it's a matter of, again, convincing them that this project is worth it, coming up with the money, coming up with the roster spot. Again, international spots, are going to kind of most likely come into play here as well. I don't think that there's necessarily magical, domestic strikers unless, Duncan McGuire has given up on his dream of Europe, but he's probably somebody that Orlando would be more likely to retain now than try to move. Yeah, it's a really weird, it's a puzzle. The puzzle is thin, as Josh Wolff says. Maybe there's some wisdom in that after all. I don't know. It's something where I think a lot of kind of the success of how this goes the rest of the season is going to hinge on what happens with that position. And if it doesn't get solved, if there's not the right person that's out there, then maybe Austin doesn't make the playoffs, right? So it's kind of tilting a little bit more towards not versus making it. I mean, there's still definitely a decent chance. And then if Dessler and Bukhari really kind of do right away what we think that they will do, I think that that's going to be certainly helpful. I think that maybe will turn some potential losses into draws or wins. That could be kind of a difference maker in terms of placement. Just kind of looking at how the top three is shaping up, though, I don't know that Austin's going to do well and again, a best of three series, which is super weird, against, either an RSL or an LAFC or the Galaxy. I mean, obviously they beat the Galaxy here in April. That was one of the, if not, I would say that it's their best performance of the season.
Yeah, clearly, to me.
Clearly. But do they have that in them for another 2 out of 3 games? I kind of don't feel like that's the case. I feel like if you play those two teams together a bunch of times, run them out, that the Galaxy are going to win the majority of the games, because they just seem like they're stronger offensively at a lot of those positions. And I don't know that necessarily everything that Austin will try to do defensively to work would necessarily work.
Yeah, I should point out the midfield for a moment, because Valencia is going to be on yellow card suspension this weekend
Oh yeah.
against Minnesota.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I guess Alonso Ramirez is playing his second game that he's able to play.
That's my guess.
Like, because they can be called up a total of 4 times, but they can only play
Mhm.
twice. Another of those roster rules that it just how much of a help is it really? Like, it's a
Yeah.
band-aid to a gaping wound.
And Austin FC 2 signed a midfielder today. So
Yeah, Diego Abarca from
some,
El Paso Locomotive looks like a promising kid, just
yep.
19 years old, like the
Mhm.
other Guilherme Biru. Looking at moves at the second team now that Roto is completely in control of everything, maybe we are seeing more of a look at what the pipeline for the future is intended to be.
And
That
in the
Alonso,
short term, it's like we need to put bodies on the field for Verdes to
yeah,
free up Ramirez to play that second and final short-term call-up game.
yeah, it just has to happen,
Mhm.
and figuring him out for a supplemental slot on the first team because he's an international, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That I
And he's on
mean,
loan.
yeah, and he's
He's
on
on loan from
loan,
Atlas.
so
He's
Austin would have to
complicated.
the labyrinthine steps of how to manage some of these deals. I don't envy Burrell's player department at all.
Avoid this Minotaur. Also, talk to Atlas about turning that loan into a buy. And find an international spot. And avoid that Minotaur.
Yeah, just just stay on the edges of the labyrinth, kid. You'll be fine. Yeah, it's the midfield is something that also could use some work. Is Owen Wolff going to eventually slot back into his natural position in the midfield? Or is he going to continue having to carry double duty in different positions where he's not real good in defense? It would be great to not have to pop him in this place or that place and just let the players who yes, they're flexible, yes, they can play in a bunch of different places, but if anything, solidifying the right back position, I would love to see Gallagher end up getting to play on the wing again, because he was real good on the wing. I don't know. Lots of I don't knows and lots of, oh God, I'm nervous about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I mean, there's kind of questions about, okay, you have a lot of center backs. Could you go to a 3 center back, 2 wing back kind of system? Would that help? Maybe a 10 is a good idea, right? Maybe having a true creator on this team or a wide playmaker would be a good idea, like we've talked about. I mean, I think Bukhari's got some playmaking abilities, but I also think that he is kind of, from what we see, from what we know, a lot of kind of a one-on-one, taking players on type of thing. Like, he'll definitely set up other players to score, but I think he enjoys scoring himself as well. So I think that's going to certainly help in a lot of instances. I think we're going to see some good things there, but still, you're not going to have the kind of string pulling like you had with Fagundes in 22 when he was getting all those assists. I think it was like, 6 goals, 15 assists, goal season for him. And a lot of those assists, of course, were to Driussi. They had something that worked. They had a chemistry. We haven't really seen that in 2 years now. And that's concerning, because that was a thing that worked and made Austin real good and really fun to watch. And we haven't really seen that since. So is it time to talk about, speaking of lots of soccer that might be fun to watch, Copa America? And then also, speaking of midfield, when we might expect Danny Pereira back?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Copa America plays out. Like, does the Austin FC sicko go, look, Danny, Julio, I'm happy for you guys. I'm proud of you guys. I hope Venezuela and Costa Rica go out early because, oh my God, dudes, do we need you?
I mean,
look, that's everyone's decision to make on their own. I'm not here to tell people how to feel, but it would certainly help Austin if Venezuela and Costa Rica went out early.
Yeah,
it sure would.
It would. But also, you want to see them succeed and do well, maybe. So here's the deal. So as we're recording a couple of hours here, my Canada is going to take on Argentina, which I don't expect to go very well, but hope springs eternal. Curious to see what Jesse Marsh coach team will look like in an international tournament, something that we did not have the opportunity for, obviously, with the US. So Venezuela, they play Ecuador on the Saturday, 5 p.m. So that's not going to interfere necessarily with the game against Minnesota that you were probably going to watch. And then you have a game against Mexico, which I believe is in SoFi, and that's pretty scary. And then finally against Jamaica, of course, which is the Q2 game. So if
Costa
Venezuela
Rica
gets
plays
bounced,
Brazil on Monday.
Yeah, that's something.
Okay.
Wow, let's see how Cascante does against Vinicius. That's gonna be fun. And then Colombia, Costa Rica, again, we saw what Colombia did recently against the US. They look pretty good. And then finally Paraguay. So if these teams do get knocked out, Venezuela would be out if they get knocked out in the group stages after that last game on Sunday the 30th. Danny would be right in Austin. Wouldn't be a quick turnaround, except, oh yeah, he's got to serve a suspension. So he would miss that next game, which is going to be the home game on the 6th against NYCFC. Cascante could theoretically come back for that one. Costa Rica's journey would end the 2nd if they don't get out of the group stages. So that would give him time clearly to get back, and he'd be fine there. And then Danny would be able to return on the 13th, that game. So, again, and that's not super helpful. That's like 2 games before Leagues Cup and when the new players come in. But, better than if, Venezuela does advance, then yeah, there are there are more games that he's going to miss because he has to still serve that suspension once he gets back.
The best thing for the midfield would be Venezuela going out relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, then we see the transition of adding the new players possibly happening while Danny is still away on international duty. So, I mean, what does that mean for the summer? Like having, Valencia's out this game. It's not like he's
So you
gonna,
plug that with Ramirez,
yeah,
but
plug
then
that
you
with
can't do that anymore.
Ramirez, who then you can't use anymore. Then on the other side of that, let's there will be a little bit of a breather for how much time Valencia has to accumulate more yellows. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if he's picking up a yellow pretty steadily, over the next few games, once he's back from suspension, I don't know. MLS rosters are screwed, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is not sustainable, and that there are some things that are coming in the summer window that's fine and everything, but they don't go nearly far enough. And I would like to think that the billionaires that own these teams did not vote against things that would make it easier on their players because they don't want to then be on the hook to spend a whole lot more money, because not all of them are into this for the soccer. Allegations have been made about this person or that person being into it for their real estate holdings and that kind of thing, and not really being interested in spending more money than they can get away with on their actual teams. It's something that you see in people just not sticking with MLS teams on the front office side of things for very, very long in a lot of, you would say, pretty essential kinds of positions. If the owners are resisting some of the roster rule changes because they just don't want to be on the hook for paying for it, that's a big problem of its own. But those closed door meetings among the hoi polloi, we're not party to that. Yeah, I don't know, man. I can get real negative real fast when thinking about the position that
Mm-hmm.
these players get put in, where it's like it's literally two players, man, two players, and that's not even on top of injuries and re-aggravations and all that kind of thing. Two players out on international duty does this to this roster, and this is not the only roster in the
Right.
league that's like this. Like,
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you could have 22 rather than 20 senior roster players. And and again, the international spots, they're not consistent via teams. Like every team theoretically gets 8, but then they get traded. Some have more, some have less. But imagine if you had 22 senior roster spots and 9 international spots, let's say, right? That's not a huge adjustment from what you've got now. And just think of what you could do flexibility wise with that, right? So, think about like the 2 extra players that you could get where you wouldn't have to be worried about the kind of roster Jenga that's happening right now.
Val Noel would probably be on the first team right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least as a supplemental, right? If there was an international spot for him, and he would be fairly useful in a situation like this.
Yeah, you would.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you could say that.
obviously,
I mean, just look at what he's been doing in Las Vegas. Like he's been tearing it
mhm.
up.
Yeah, and USL is an MLS, but he's someone who could come in, I think, and give good minutes. And yeah, because that's the thing. Because I mean, theoretically, you have Micah Burton who's on a supplemental spot, but from what we've heard from Wolff and what we've seen with our own eyes from Verdos matches, he's not ready yet. Like he's not there. And then I don't know that he necessarily helps necessarily in the midfield as much
Right.
as somebody who is more whose game is more like Danny's. Micah's is not quite that, so it's kind of different positionally. But if you had that kind of flexibility and you could get those players, you could weather these kind of situations, right? So I mean, again, it's a great thing. Wolff has talked about it, and fans have talked about it being a great thing that international players are getting to play with their national teams. That's a big honor. That's a good feather in the cap. That's obviously good experience that comes back for the club team, but it's also putting your team at the detriment in a pretty important stretch, right? So where it's not just a normal schedule, but it's a compressed schedule with lots of games that are difference making games in the standings. So obviously a problem.
Yep. So yeah, I'm with you in rooting for Canada tonight, and
Oh yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if Jesse Marsh pulls off an upset to
Mhm.
open the thing up, but I just don't feel like that's going to happen.
I don't either. I mean, so we'll know this by the time that this comes out. And by the way, if you are following the U.S., as I suspect you might be, they're playing against Bolivia on the 23rd, which seems like the easiest of their three. And then of course they are playing Panama, which is a traditional CONCACAF opponent of theirs. And then they play Uruguay on July 1st, and that seems like all sorts of trouble. But
Yeah,
I think
I
that's a
don't.
group they can get out of. But
Mm,
Uruguay's darn good.
I disagree. I don't think they're going to make it out of the group.
Oh, okay.
I
What's
don't.
that?
Yeah, I like for me. It's not as scientific as it is. I just don't think the group has the kind of cohesion that they need to under Berhalter. I think we will see at least a couple of just absolutely bafflingly bad plays that
Okay.
that contribute to an early exit in the group stage that um that that hopefully forces something of a reckoning. I just don't see it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly flaws, and I'm certainly not the biggest Berhalter fan, especially kind of seeing the ups and downs that they tend to have under him. It's there's kind of a reminiscence of watching a Wolf season play out and watching a stretch of international matches play out with Berhalter. Obviously, Wolf being part of that Berhalter coaching tree that we talked about. I thought we sprayed for that, that sort of thing. But I do think that the U.S. can beat Bolivia and Panama. I don't think that's a very heavy lift.
Yeah,
So,
I think they
if you get
can.
2 wins out of that, then I think you are getting out of the group. I just don't know if they're going to progress much beyond that.
Yeah, I think they can, but I don't see them. I don't know. One good game out of the last couple doesn't have me terribly optimistic for them.
Mhm. I understand that. Yeah. I understand that lack of optimism. That's something going around. All right. I think we have exhausted ourselves and our list of topics to talk about today. So, anything that you want to add to the conversation?
Speed Bump was back last night.
Yep.
And I mean, notable
Looked
for
very happy to be there.
notable for those of us in the media corps. Austin FC comm staffer Emily Alvarado is leaving the team to go work for CONCACAF in Miami,
Yep.
and I wish her all the best. If you've ever seen Sebastian Driussi do a press conference, you've seen Emily live translating on the fly for him. She will be missed. She's great at
Yep.
what she does, and I know that she is going to be very deeply missed by the players, who have always felt very safe and comfortable and happy to have somebody who did the job as well as they did. So
Yeah.
it's Austin FC's loss, CONCACAF's big gain. I hope she enjoys the CONCA chaos.
Yeah, that I was just gonna say, like, even more chaos than managing Austin FC. You are in it. Armadillos do like rain, by the way. They enjoy warm, wet environments,
There you go.
according to Terminix's website. So if you trust a pest control company, then yeah. Speed Bump was happy to be there. Also, we have a third dog in our household right now. We are still struggling to name it, coming up with the name that everybody likes. So if you have name suggestions, send those our way. We are torn right now between Disco Sparkle Pants and Lady Pawpaw and Scruffy. Scruffy contributed by my niece. I'm
Hmm.
not a big fan of that, but she's very insistent and has a lot of sort of kind of sway over my daughter. So they are resolutely calling the dog Scruffy in light of all the good names that we're producing. Also, the dog is terrified of everything. So wish us well if you have tips for making a new dog more acclimated to a home. That would be good. She's found a spot on the couch she likes, so that's a plus. But perhaps when she gets a name, she'll fully settle in. And when she gets a name, call her with a name on it. But we are at an impasse at this point. So Moises, do you have any name suggestions before I let you go?
One of the ones that you said was kicking around was Ziggy. I like
Yeah,
Ziggy. Ziggy's
I
a
like
good one.
Ziggy too. That's kind of already been voted down
That's unfortunate.
by the under 12 set. So
Huh.
as we are currently being held hostage by parents.
I don't know.
Parents can relate.
I don't know.
Parents can relate
Let's pull it. Let's see. What are some of the slang terms the kids these days? Riz. Name the dog Riz.
What does that mean?
I look it up on Urban Dictionary, Phil. Come on,
I will.
you do your hello fellow kids research on your own time.
Oh my goodness, that side always kind of scares me a little bit.
Cappuccino, call her Cappy for
Okay.
short.
Okay.
You know, I like a coffee drink name.
Yeah.
Full name could be Frappuccino. Call her Frappy.
She does drink out of my wife's coffee, so that's something
Oh,
that she does.
oh,
So
okay.
that could be
All right.
something. So yeah, Ziggy. I mean, we're Bowie fans, and also the dog has a brown eye and a blue eye, so we thought that was going to be really good.
Yeah,
But
you mentioned Bowie being an option. I was like, well, but then
yeah,
all of your English friends will call her Bowie, and she'll be nothing but confused.
and all the Texans will call her Bowie.
Hey,
Really
that's my friend's
confusing.
dog, Bowie. No, that's Bowie. Bowie, but okay. All right, guys.
All right, brings us to the end. Thanks so much. Appreciate you being here, and we'll hitch up with more emergencies next week.
Where's Phil? He usually starts this off.
He's teaching in San Antonio today. Colby, go ahead and start us off.